young woman crashes her car on a dark, snow-covered road and disappears without a trace. No phone calls, no messages, just an abandoned car, a cold wind sweeping through the trees, and 1,000 unanswered questions. But was Maura Murray a victim of foul play, or did she vanish by choice? 20 years later, the mystery still lingers, haunting the shadows of the White Mountains, whispering through the cold winter air. This is the story of Maura Murray. If you have heard of this case before, you've probably got the same story. A smart, athletic young woman, a nursing student, who mysteriously vanished without a trace. But who was Maura Murray, really? Maura was born on May 4th, 1982, in Brockton, Massachusetts. She grew up in a competitive but loving Irish Catholic family. As the fourth of 5 siblings, including her older sisters Kathleen and Julie, her older brother Fred, and a younger half-brother Kurt, Maura quickly learned to hold her own. The Murray family was all about sports, especially running. Her siblings ran track, and Maura sprinted ahead in their footsteps. She became a star athlete at Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, where she stood out not just for her speed but for their relentless determination. Maura's academic prowess matched her athletic skills. She earned acceptance into the prestigious United States Military Academy at West Point, where she studied chemical engineering. But after 3 semesters, she decided it wasn't the right fit. West Point was a world of discipline and pressure, a world that didn't seem to suit her. So, she transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to pursue a nursing career, a choice that felt more like her, caring, empathetic, and always wanting to help. But Maura wasn't just a resume of achievements. Her sister Julie remembers her as the family's joke star. Quick-witted, clever, and fun, Maura knew how to bring a smile to any situation. She would send letters without a reason, little notes of kindness that captured who she was, but beneath that bright, generous personality, was there something else? Something only her closest family members could sense. November 2003. Maura Murray's life was not without its shadows. 3 months before she disappeared, she was caught using a stolen credit card to order food from several restaurants in Hadley, Massachusetts. It was a mistake, a small, almost petty crime, but one with consequences. The charge was set to be dismissed after 3 months of good behavior, but it hinted at something beneath the surface, a sense of restlessness, a willingness to take risks. February 5th, 2004. On February 5th, Maura was working a late shift at her campus security job when she received a phone call from her sister Kathleen. On the other end of the line, Kathleen was struggling, an ongoing battle with alcoholism, fresh out of rehab, only to be taken straight to a liquor store by her fiancé. For Maura, something snapped. She broke down crying uncontrollably. Her supervisor found her in a near catatonic state, just completely zoned out, as he later described. He escorted her back to her dorm, but Maura's silence spoke louder than any words. When asked what was wrong, she could only mutter 2 words: "My sister." But this explanation would not surface until 2017, 13 years later. In that time, the incident remained a mystery, a breaking point without a clear reason. February 7th, 2004. Just 2 days later, Maura's father, Fred, came to Amherst. The plan seemed simple. Car shopping, a father-daughter dinner, a brief visit. That night, Maura borrowed her father's Toyota Corolla to attend a dorm party. But at 2:30 a.m. on February 8th, she crashed the car into a guardrail on Route 9 in Hadley, causing nearly $10,000 in damage. An accident report was filed, but there were no sobriety tests and no further investigation. Just a crash in the night, and a promise from Fred that insurance would cover it. But there were strange details. The time of the crash, the lack of a thorough check, and a call made from Fred's phone at 4:49 a.m. to Maura's boyfriend. No one knows who made that call or what was said. February 9th, 2004. By February 9th, Maura's life seemed to be caught in a quiet freefall. In the early hours of the morning, she was on her computer, searching MapQuest for directions to the Berkshire and Burlington, Vermont. She seemed to be planning something, but no one knew what. At 1 p.m., she emailed her boyfriend a message that seemed both loving and distant. "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to anyone. I promised to call today though. Love you, Maura." But it wasn't just her boyfriend she contacted. She made a call to a condominium association in New Hampshire, a place her family had vacationed before, but she didn't book anything. Was she trying to escape somewhere familiar? Or was she testing options, unsure of where to go? Then, at 1:24 p.m., she sent an email to her nursing school supervisor claiming there had been a death in the family. But that was a lie. There was no death, no funeral to attend. But it was enough to excuse her absence. In the hours that followed, Maura's actions seemed like those of someone preparing for a journey, a call to a nursing student, though the reason remains unknown. A call was made to inquire about hotel bookings in Stowe, Vermont, but no reservation was made. A final call to her boyfriend, which went to voicemail. Her dorm room told its own story. When police searched it later, they found most of her belongings packed neatly in boxes, the walls bare, as if she had already decided to leave. On top of the boxes was a printed email to her boyfriend, hinting at trouble in their relationship. At 3:15 p.m., Maura withdrew $280 from an ATM. Security footage showed she was alone, her expression neutral. She then went to a nearby liquor store, purchasing about $40 worth of alcohol, Bailey's, Kahlua, vodka, and a bottle of Franzia wine. Again, she was alone. She picked up accident report forms from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles, a lingering detail from the crash just 2 days earlier. Her black 1996 Saturn was packed with clothing, toiletries, textbooks, and even her birth control pills. It seemed like a journey without a clear destination. And at some point, she drove away from the familiar safety of her campus. Around 7:27 p.m., a resident along Route 112 in Woodsville, New Hampshire, heard a loud thump. Looking outside, she saw a car, Maura's black Saturn, stuck against a snowbank, its front end damaged. The witness would later claim she saw a man smoking a cigarette inside the car, but this detail would change. A trick of the light, perhaps, or a red glow from a phone. A school bus driver, Butch Atwood, stopped to help. He saw a young woman, Maura, walking around the car, cold and shivering. He offered to call for help, but she refused, insisting she had already called AAA. But he knew it was a lie, since there was no cell service in the area. Suspicious, Butch went home and called the police himself. At 7:46 p.m., a Haverhill police officer arrived at the scene. But Maura was already gone. No sign of her, just her car, damaged and abandoned. But the car said a lot. The driver's side windshield was cracked. Both airbags had deployed. Red stains that looked like wine were scattered inside. A damaged box of Franzia wine sat in the back seat. An empty beer bottle rolled on the floor. But there were also other things: gloves, jewelry, a stuffed animal, and Maura's favorite book, Not Without Peril, a story of survival and tragedy in the White Mountains. Her debit card, credit cards, and cell phone were gone, never used again. And most chillingly, a rag was stuffed into the tailpipe, a detail police would later claim was meant to prevent the car from starting. But who would do that? Maura or someone else? By 8 p.m., police and emergency services were on the scene. But Maura was gone, as if she had simply walked off the earth. A witness claimed to see a young person walking along Route 112 around 8:30 p.m., 4 miles from the crash site. But this sighting would only be reported months later. In a span of just minutes, Maura Murray's world had gone from confusion to complete disappearance. When Maura's car was found abandoned on that snowy stretch of Route 112, the first question was simple. Where was Maura? But that question quickly spiraled into a maze of confusion and dead ends. By the afternoon of February 10th, 2004, less than 2 hours after her disappearance, Maura was officially declared a missing person. Police issued a "be on the lookout" alert. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a dark coat, jeans, and carrying a black backpack. But for a missing person case, everything seemed oddly disconnected. Fred Murray, Maura's father, only learned that her car had been found when he got a voicemail, left on his home answering machine while he was away on a work trip. By the time he was contacted directly, precious hours had already slipped by. Fred rushed to Haverhill, New Hampshire, arriving before dawn on February 11th. But he wasn't alone in his desperation. At 8 a.m., search teams from the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department began scouring the area, joined by Maura's family. Tracking dogs were brought in. One picked up Maura's scent from a glove and traced it 100 yards east of her abandoned car. And then, nothing. The scent vanished. Investigators suggested she might have left the area in another vehicle, but there was no proof. Her boyfriend, along with his parents, arrived that evening. They were questioned, and in a moment of strange uncertainty, he turned on his phone to find a voicemail, one he swore sounded like Maura sobbing. But this call wasn't normal. It was traced to a calling card issued by the American Red Cross. A glitch, a mistake, or something far stranger. Within days, the investigation splintered into two conflicting ideas. Police leaned towards the simplest explanation. Maura had either run away to escape her life, or she had taken her own life. They even publicly suggested that she was intoxicated at the crash site. But this didn't match what the bus driver had told them. He insisted Maura didn't appear drunk or even disoriented, just cold and nervous. Her family immediately rejected the runaway theory. They knew Maura was struggling, but disappearing without a trace, leaving behind everything, her family, friends, and dreams of becoming a nurse. It didn't make sense. For them, something else had to be at play. On February 12th, Fred and Maura's boyfriend held a press conference, pleading for information. That same day, police publicly listed her as endangered and possibly suicidal. The search expanded. The Haverhill police were joined by the FBI just 10 days after her disappearance, an unusual step for a missing person case. A helicopter with thermal imaging swept the snow-covered forests. Ground teams scoured the woods, walking in freezing conditions. Cadaver dogs combed the area, but the silence of the forest seemed to swallow any trace of Maura. Even as the ground searches continued, new clues only led to more confusion. Maura's older sister found a pair of ripped white women's underwear in the snow near a secluded trail on February 26th. For a moment, hope flashed. Maybe this was a lead, but DNA testing ruled them out. They didn't belong to Maura. By the end of February, Maura's family was exhausted. They checked out of their motel, but Fred refused to give up. He returned nearly every weekend, wandering the dense woods, knocking on doors, searching for any sign of his daughter. But all he found was frustration and suspicion. Locals began complaining about trespassing. The police warned him to respect private property. But how do you respect distance when your daughter is missing? Then, just weeks later, a chilling parallel emerged. Brianna Maitland, an 18-year-old from Montgomery, Vermont, disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. An abandoned car, a young woman vanishing without a trace. Media quickly drew comparisons, and whispers of a serial predator spread. But police dismissed any link between the two cases. In July 2004, with the summer heat melting away the snow, police launched another search, Nearly 100 searchers, state troopers, and volunteers combed a 1-mile radius around Maura's crash site. The focus was on one item, her black backpack, the one she was last seen carrying. But like everything else, it seemed to have vanished. But then, a possible break. A local man approached Fred Murray with a rusty, stained knife. He claimed it belonged to his brother, who lived less than a mile from where Maura's car had been found. The man claimed his brother and his brother's girlfriend had acted suspiciously after the disappearance. He even suggested the knife had been used to kill Maura. Days later, the brother reportedly scrapped his car. It was a disturbing story, too disturbing to ignore. But when police investigated, the leads crumbled. Family members claimed the man who turned in the knife was simply trying to get reward money, that he was a known drug user. By late 2005, the search had shifted from desperate hope to legal action. Fred Murray filed lawsuits against several law enforcement agencies, demanding access to case files. But even this battle led nowhere. Online forums buzzed with speculation, with one user claiming to have seen a black backpack similar to Maura's behind a restroom at Pemigewasset Overlook. Police acknowledged the tip, but never confirmed whether they investigated. As the years passed, Maura's case fell into a grim silence. In 2006, a team of retired detectives joined the investigation, believing that something more sinister than a simple disappearance had taken place. They weren't alone in their suspicions. Tom Shamshak, a former police chief, publicly stated, "This is something beyond a mere missing person case. Something ominous could have happened here." Rumors spread. Theories twisted and turned. Some claimed she had been taken. Others believed she had escaped to start a new life. And then, the strangest twist yet, an A-frame house just a mile from the crash site. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and they went wild in a closet, seemingly reacting to the scent of human remains. A piece of carpet was cut and sent for testing, but the results were never made public. What did they find? Or did they find nothing at all? By 2009, Maura's case was officially listed as a cold case. But for her family, for her father who kept returning to the White Mountains, and for the online communities who obsessed over every detail, it never truly went cold. In 2021, bone fragments were discovered on Loon Mountain, 25 miles from where Maura vanished. For a moment, hope resurfaced, only to be dashed when the remains were confirmed not to be hers. 20 years later, Maura Murray is still missing. No trace, no definitive answers. Just a family caught in the darkness of a mystery that refuses to end. For many who have followed the disappearance of Maura Murray, one theory stands out above all others. Foul play. It's a theory backed by more than just fear. It's the cold logic of a young woman vanishing on a dark, isolated road without a trace. Tim Pilleri and Lance Reinstierna, who have spent years studying this case, have repeatedly stated that they believe most people suspect foul play. They're not alone. Retired State Police Lieutenant John Healy, who investigated the case, summed it up with chilling simplicity. She got into the wrong car. She went to the wrong house. In his eyes, Maura was the victim of a crime of opportunity, a situation where a stranger with dark intentions saw a vulnerable young woman and acted. But what does crime of opportunity really mean here? Was Maura lured by someone offering help? Did she step into a car she thought would bring her to safety, only for it to become a trap? Maura's own family shares this fear. Her brother Curtis has said, "I think Maura was taken. I think she most likely got in the car with the wrong person, and nothing good came from that." Their father, Fred, who has spent 2 decades searching for his daughter, is even more certain. But if Maura was a victim of foul play, who was responsible? And how did they manage to make her disappear without a trace? One name has always lingered in the shadows of suspicion: Butch Atwood, the school bus driver who was the last known person to speak with Maura. On the surface, Butch seemed like a good Samaritan. He saw Maura standing by her crashed car, offered help, and even called the police when she insisted she didn't need assistance. But beneath this simple story are details that refuse to sit still. Details that make Butch's role in that night feel far more complex. First, there is his own behavior that night. After speaking with Maura, Butch drove his bus home, but instead of parking it in the usual spot beneath the floodlight, where he could have had a clear view of Maura's car, he backed it up beside his house, nearly hidden from view. A strange decision for a man who had just seen a young woman stranded in the cold. And there is his account of that night. Over time, Butch's descriptions of his encounter with Maura changed. In one version, he claimed she was standing outside her car, steady and sober. In another, she was inside, possibly intoxicated, needing to lean on the vehicle for support. Witnesses later claimed Butch even gave conflicting statements about whether she was alone or if he saw other vehicles pass. But it gets stranger. Shortly after speaking with Maura, Butch went back out to his bus, claiming he needed to do paperwork. But paperwork alone, in a cold, dark bus, when his girlfriend was inside the warm house. And while police would later search the area, there is no clear record of them conducting a forensic examination of Butch's bus. If Maura had entered that bus, if something had happened there, would anyone have known? Speculation around Butch doesn't stop at his behavior. There are even questions about his connections. Butch was known to be familiar with local law enforcement, a common connection in a small town. Some have whispered about a possibility, an unthinkable one, that Butch and others may have known more about that night than they have ever revealed. But if Butch was somehow involved, there are also questions. Why call the police at all? Why voluntarily insert himself into the investigation? Some argue it's a classic tactic. Killers inserting themselves into the story, making themselves witnesses to control the narrative. Of course, Butch Atwood was never formally named a suspect. He cooperated with the police, even taking a lie detector test, though there are conflicting reports about how well he performed on it. He later moved to Florida, where he passed away, taking with him any secrets he may have had. But whether Butch was involved or not, his strange actions and conflicting accounts add another layer of darkness to the theory of foul play. But for all the darkness that shrouds her case, there is another theory. One that paints Maura as the mastermind of her own disappearance. A theory that suggests she wasn't taken, but instead she ran. Some believe Maura was overwhelmed by her life. Legal trouble with a stolen credit card, her academic struggles, the crash of her father's car just 2 days before her disappearance. One mistake after another, each one adding to a quiet, crushing weight. Could Maura have decided to escape it all? According to Tim and Lance, the idea of Maura starting over somewhere new is a possibility they find compelling. Some even believe she might have joined an underground network, changing her identity, disappearing into a new life far from the scrutiny of her past. Canada is often mentioned, with an easy border to cross from New Hampshire and a place where a fresh start could begin. But there is a darker twist to this theory. Journalist James Renner, who has spent years investigating Maura's case, has suggested she may have been traveling in tandem with another driver, someone she trusted, someone who helped her disappear. But even Renner's theory is built on whispers and shadows. If Maura ran away, why has she never reached out? Why has there never been a single confirmed sighting? Was she so desperate to escape that she abandoned everyone she loved? Or is this theory just a comforting lie, an escape that never happened? 2 decades have passed since Maura Murray vanished on a cold, isolated road in New Hampshire. But her case remains anything but forgotten. For her family, it is a wound that never heals, a search that never ends. And now, that search has a new voice. In early 2024, Maura's sister, Julie Murray, launched a podcast titled Media Pressure: The Untold Story of Maura Murray. But this wasn't just another retelling of the same old mystery. It was a reclamation. Through the podcast, Julie shares her family's raw, unfiltered truth. The sleepless nights, the endless questions, the unbearable silence. It's not just about reaching a new audience. It's about reclaiming Maura's narrative from speculation and strangers. Julie recounts how, while recording with her father and brothers, they often broke down in tears. Yet the podcast is just one part of the family's fight. On the 21st anniversary of Maura's disappearance, they held another vigil at the crash site in Woodsville, New Hampshire, keeping the memory of Maura alive. But for her sister Julie, it wasn't enough. She has become a relentless advocate, using social media to correct misinformation, share updates, and keep Maura's case alive. In one episode, she revealed a chilling detail: a handwritten phone number found in Maura's car, a number that, according to her, was never investigated by police. When Julie called, the person on the other end claimed it was the first time anyone had asked them about Maura, but the police also stayed involved. In 2022, the FBI issued a national alert, and New Hampshire State Police launched new searches in Landaff and Easton. In 2024, they released an age progression photo of Maura, hoping someone might recognize her. Yet, like so many times before, the searches led to nothing. Still, the Murray family refuses to give up. Through the podcast, the vigils, and Julie's tireless advocacy, they fight to keep Maura's name alive. Because for them, Maura isn't just a mystery. She is a sister, a daughter, and a life that was interrupted. But with each passing year, the question remains: will the truth ever come to light? Or will Maura Murray be a name whispered in the cold winds of the White Mountains? Maura Murray's disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries in modern true crime, an unsolved puzzle with too many pieces that just don't fit. And you know, I usually like to wrap up these videos with my own theory. But this time, I don't have one. I've gone over the facts, the theories, the strange details, and yet, I'm just as baffled as anyone else. Was Maura taken? Did she run? Or was it something we haven't even imagined yet? Honestly, I don't know. But if you want to dive even deeper into this case, I encourage you to check out Media Pressure: The Untold Story of Maura Murray, the podcast created by her sister, Julie. It's a first-hand look at the case from the people who lived it. And it might just be the closest we ever get to understanding what really happened to Maura. If you found this story interesting, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to Maura Murray? Do you have a theory? I'd love to hear it. Until next time, stay safe.